Much has happened since the Big Green Old Mutual returned back to its roots back in June of 2018, which is 3 years ago almost. The financial services giant, with now 175 years history, has seen the last 3 years dish up several challenges. There was a nasty CEO leadership squabble. That's finally been put to bed. There's been the managed separation with Nedbank and Quilter sort of going their own ways, and this restructuring that has set the group on a new trajectory, focusing on emerging markets. And then just when it looks to push on, COVID struck. And I think it's been the case for so many businesses. We're joined now by Prabashini Moodley, Managing Director of Old Mutual Corporate. Prabashini, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, before we talk about the Big Green, on a personal note, how have you managed over what has been more than a year now since the emergence of this new virus on the scene? And I just think back to January last year, and we're thinking about what was going on in Wuhan. It seemed so disconnected. And in the last 12 months, the entire world has been upended. How has it affected you personally?
Yeah, interesting question, Michael. I think I've gotten through it with a whole lot of support. I feel so much closer to my family. And I must say, as a household, we've gotten much closer, just supporting one another, being there. It's so easy in the corporate world, especially to get on into the rat race and just be always busy and be quite, to neglect your family a little bit. And I think, I'm extremely grateful that I have good health and my family's in good health, and they've been able to support me through this. And then I must say also my colleagues, whether it was the Old Mutual Limited group colleagues or within Old Mutual Corporates, which is the business I take care of. It's been wonderful, to really connect as colleagues and support one another, even though we've been apart now for almost 10 months.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how we've managed to do a lot of that because of the technology at our disposal now? If this, I often think of this pandemic had struck just 10 years ago, without the benefits of cloud and really fast internet, it would have been an entirely different experience. And I think far more discombobulating and disconnecting than we've managed over the last 12 months. Now, on that note, can you just provide some color around the challenges of operating a business during the pandemic and how Old Mutual Corporate has overcome any of those challenges, and really how companies are adapting to this time of crisis?
So Michael, right up front, initially it was just about being able to operate, making sure our staff was safe, and then enabling them really very practically. On a normal basis, not everyone in the business works on a laptop. We have people in the call center, in servicing, in finance who work on desktops. With higher speeds and so on. So initially it was some very practical things, just enabling people in terms of tools to be able to work and stabilize the business, through that period. We've also had to connect just as human beings. And I think, often in earlier on in my career, I recall being told by various people, don't get so emotional, keep the emotion out of it. And I think we had a situation here with the pandemic where you had to recognize and acknowledge the emotion and what we were going through as human beings. So that's, that initially, and I think supported being Old Mutual Corporate within a broader group and having the support of the broader group through the crisis really set us up. It was, of course, difficult, navigating how we stay in touch with clients. In the corporate business, it's very much about relationships, and relationship driven, which tends to be, in-person, physical engagement. So some of our larger clients found it easier, to adapt, and we could stay in touch very well. But it wasn't always easy, with the smaller clients, just balancing safety of customers and then being there for our clients at the same time.
As a leader, did you find the transition tricky? What I'm hearing you say is you probably, in terms of your leadership style, which is a very personal leadership style, Prabashini, I think you must have found it a bit of an easier transition than perhaps others who don't necessarily have that relationship-driven leadership style.
I would not call it easy at all. So Michael, it was, the timing was very interesting. And I mean, you know, this is a global pandemic, so it's got nothing to do with me. But I started my role as MD of the corporate business just at the end of 2019. So 2020 was really my first year leading the business. So I was also transitioning in terms of leadership. You know, I ran a function, a segment function, and now leading a business. So a lot of that I had to find. And I think, you know, maybe naturally I do enjoy engaging with people and connecting with people, and creating space for that actually made it easier. It wasn't always obvious what to do. It was tricky. But I think having the support, and then just knowing that collectively we have to make the decisions. This thing was bigger than any of us. And in a strange way, the technology and having Microsoft Teams, which we work on, made it easier to connect with people across the entire business. I mean, I have spoken to every single person in the Old Mutual corporate segment at least once, you know, on an individual basis in the past year.
That's a lot of people. Just give us a sense of the size of Old Mutual corporate for viewers who don't really get the sense of the scale of this behemoth.
No, you'll be interested to know it's actually, from a headcount, we're not a massive you know, business unit within Old Mutual. We have just over 300 people, you know, in my direct team. There are way more people who support us, from client servicing, technology, and administration. Yeah, but it's amazing when you're not limited by travel budgets or the size of an auditorium or a meeting room. You can actually connect with more people, even though we're sitting, you know, separately. So we've had to look for those very thin silver linings in the situation.
300 people is still effectively one a day over a working year, over the course of a full working year, that you've had to connect with. On the flip side of that, I think many people were concerned that productivity would decline as people worked from home and they weren't under the clock, so to speak. I think what we've seen, though, is almost the exact opposite. In services in particular, people are now rolling out of bed into an office. They're living at work. They're not working from home. And I think the challenge now is to ensure and manage that people don't burn out, because you've got the stress of the pandemic, and people are also now working, it seems, a lot longer hours every day.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, we've definitely seen that. So, you know, without the commute in the morning and sitting in the traffic, you find you getting into a meeting much earlier, and the day is being stretched. And I think we've got to be very careful as business leaders that, you know, what we've seen is very high engagement. And I think certainly in our business, where our sense of purpose and our role as a business, and, you know, within the broader Old Mutual, has really galvanized people. And we've seen excellent engagement. So people want to be there for customers. I mean, in the nature of our business, it's extremely tragic to see the number of claims coming through. But our people want to service those customers, and we want to be there for them. But that can lead to burnout. So we're finding, you know, in 2021 especially, we're going to need to be a lot more mindful and support people that it's okay, because I think there's also a lot of anxiety in the system. You know, there's anxiety in the world. The picture with COVID changes on a daily basis, and it's called COVID-19, but we're still very much in it. You know, it's not over yet. And what turned out as a crisis, and I think a lot of adrenaline got us through the first few months. I'm just amazed, and I think the level of resilience. But we've got to watch the burnout, and that's what we're trying to grapple with as a leadership team currently.
Yeah, and obviously the space that you play in, things like employee benefits and the like, I mean, that's top of mind for many organizations, large and small. to manage these teams that have been remarkably resilient, but are all under immense strain. If you're a young family and you're doing homeschooling and you're zooming into meetings and juggling all of these balls, it does take a lot out of you. On the digital front and the digital side of the business, and now every business before COVID had some kind of digital transformation strategy. That was clear. The fourth industrial revolution had become this overused buzzword, but really the process of digitizing processes started way before COVID. What we have seen, though, is COVID being the accelerant on that fire, and it really has speeded up that process. I'm sure it's been similar for Old Mutual Corporate. Just take me through that journey.
Absolutely. And I think, like exactly the way you say, we've had a digital strategy and, milestones and objectives to achieve. But the part that's really been accelerated is adoption. And the adoption of digital means of engaging and digitizing aspects of the business, both when it comes to our staff as well as customers. So, for example, member benefit statements. There's something that we send out regularly. And up until up until 2019, they were sent, paper copies. So these had to be printed, they had to be physically transported. And we'd often talk about, we could email these statements or we could send them in other means. It would save time, it would save money. It's just more efficient. Customers want, and you'd have pushback from various places. It might be the intermediary, it might be the employer, it might be various parts. And we've done everything digitally in 2020 because there was no other option. Yeah. And people were actually grateful that we were able to do that. So I think it has definitely accelerated aspects. We launched as Old Mutual Corporate, looking at the dire state of SMEs and how the pandemic has disproportionately impacted them. We went to markets with a focused content publication for SMEs called 9 Yards, and it was digital first. So we've also shifted, from here's the process and let's see what we can do digitally around it to actually designing things to be digitally first.
Yeah, and I think that has been the one upside. And we talk about silver linings. I'm a natural optimist. I think most people in business are. That otherwise you wouldn't be there if you're a pessimist. But the silver lining has certainly been this rapid adoption of technology that's going to make us more efficient and be able to better service the clients or the relationships that we have inside the business, either a client relationship or a supplier or a vendor relationship, all of those things really being improved by technology. Now, I also understand that you're busy with a new philosophy, a reimagined philosophy post the virus. What does that look like? And take me through the thought process that's gone into that.
So it's something our group CEO, Ian Williamson, shared at our interim results. And we were looking at, 3 phases. The first was a stabilization phase, and that was just about putting in place a continuity plan, making sure things like solvency and liquidity we're well taken care of, enabling our staff, taking care of their health and safety and well-being. And the second phase is about transition. Of course, we're not yet out of the pandemic, but we've gone into a crisis and we're managing sort of an in-between phase, and we need to be able to transition out of that. And reimagine is acknowledging that we will not go back to exactly the way things were. Certain things have changed, certain things have changed forever. And it's about looking at what are the opportunities and how do we then adapt to take advantage of whatever opportunities are presented. So the world is experiencing a massive disruption. And any crisis, shouldn't be wasted. There will be opportunities. If you're an incumbent business, to look at your own business, doing things differently. If you're a brand new business and looking at more entrepreneurial opportunities, in the environment and to produce new solutions. So the reimagine is saying, as we come out and we get into this new world, which we think is going to be more of a hybrid world, So we don't think there will be work from home forever. But we are social beings.
Right.
A lot of the culture, a lot of the connection comes through engagement. So but on the other hand, this massive, proof of concept, global proof of concept of working from home has shown it shouldn't just be a select few. Actually, it is possible, for an entire organization to work remotely. So it's acknowledging that there are changes and what's the good that you can take out of it. I have not printed a single piece of paper in 10 months. If I was sitting in the office, all signatures have been done electronically. You've seen, I've seen an increase in the number of secure mechanisms that, various institutions are then utilizing secure software, so that you can sign and it won't be intercepted. So if I was in the office, I would have found excuses or reasons that certain items needed to be printed. So we can, I think it's the resilience, and one of the lessons we'd like to take into the reimagining is it's possible to change. It's possible to make radical changes, if we're brave enough and bold enough, and we don't want to lose that. So that's what the reimagining is all about.
That's a really important point. And I think one that will start to emerge now is that we've got this momentum. We've proven to ourselves that we can change, we can adapt. And so to harness that positive side of change and momentum. And I was going to ask you what you see as one of the biggest changes, because so much is being spoken about. Is work from home going to be the new normal? I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to be a hybrid model. I struggle to see how a business or an organization can build culture in a purely online environment. So what do you see as perhaps the most permanent or lasting of the changes? Is it this hybrid model that we're going to now adopt?
It's interesting from if I can answer that in two parts, because I think it's also, for me, what's been a massive realization or take up is just how interconnected we are. And even with and all the conversations that are happening about what we need to do to rebuild the economy and get business working, is this connection between lives and livelihoods. You can't separate them. The livelihoods enable people to have decent lives. So you can't actually just go after one to the exclusion of the other. So I think the interconnectedness, and I've been quite encouraged in South Africa. Yes, we don't always get it right. Yes, we still have lots of issues, but the partnership that's really growing and developing between government, public sector and private sector. We've got some excellent private sector, businesses that are world class, that are in South Africa. And then we've got, on the other hand, our own unique set of problems. So what I would love to see as a lasting thing is the ongoing partnership collaboration between public and private sector. And I mean, that's at a broader level, I think, in South Africa. And I think that can help set us up into the future, because there are roles for both. Yeah. In business, I think work from anywhere is going to become huge, but with some hybrid physical. There are companies globally that do it. I mean, I've met some people who say their entire business has never come together. They're working for a company headquartered in Amsterdam, and they're sitting in Dubai, and they've never met a single colleague, and it's mind-boggling. But I still see that as maybe being a bit of the exception, right, rather than the rule. Yeah. So I see us doing work from anywhere, but being hybrid in person as well, and then becoming more integrated, I think, between our lives and our livelihoods.
And that integration that you speak of and collaboration between the public and private sector is a great sign, because what we've been short of in South Africa is trust. And I think understandably so. If you look at what happened under the previous administration and state capture and repurposing the functions of the state to serve a narrow interest. And now we've got to try and recalibrate that ethical foundation, recalibrate the trust. And I've got to commend the president, because I think he's doing a good job. I know many people are impatient. They want to see people in orange overalls, and why haven't the Guptas been arrested yet, and all of those things. But if you take a step back and you look at the broad picture, planks are being put in place. The restructuring of Eskom, the unbundling, the spectrum auction issue, yes, maybe a little bit slower than we had hoped, but there are signs that we're moving in the right direction. That said, we've got the very important budget coming up. The finance minister has now shaved off all of his hair. People are worried that this means there might be haircuts for debt holders. What would you like to see from the finance minister? What would be your tips for Tito?
Oh, Michael, thanks for asking, but I wouldn't give him any tips, because I think it's an incredibly difficult job. I do not envy him at all. I think we need some extreme discipline from our finance function as a country, but some tough choices. We're not in a situation as a country, and it's irrelevant to this moment, I think, debating stuff about the past. We are where we are, and we've got some tough choices to make, and dealing with the pandemic will take resources. We need to find the money for the vaccines. I was very pleased to see, Treasury saying, yes, they will find the money for the vaccines and it will be covered. But we have to make choices. We have to make some tough trade-offs. And I think seeing some discipline and clarity around the trade-offs. And there are aspects that only governments can deliver for the country. And I think seeing a bit more clarity around making the choices to allocate resources and spending, and then follow through on the outcomes. Because we like to focus on the money and the debt, but a lot of it is about delivery. It's almost like having a wonderful strategy, but if you don't actually execute, then it's almost irrelevant. So I think it's an extremely difficult balancing act, but more than a balancing act is some clarity on the tough choices we're making as a country, as opposed to trying to just spread what little we have in terms of fiscal budget, more thinly. So I'd love to see that. I think on the employee benefits space, we did hear quite a bit came out of the medium-term policy statement in October last year. The minister referred to a review of Regulation 28. It would be great to get an update on that if there's been some movement. He also hinted, not hinted, he said explicitly, allowing some access for members of pension funds, some early access to their funds, but combining that with some compulsory preservation. So a bit more clarity on where we're going with that, and I think it's the type of tough compromises we have to make. But yeah, so that we can have more movement on that. Yeah, it's an incredibly tough job, but look forward to hearing what comes out of it.
I wouldn't take it for all the money, what's left of it in Treasury. I think it is an extremely tough job, and we can't wait to see what he's done to ensure that his tiny little Alloferox is still alive and well. Prabashini Moodley, thank you very much for sharing your insights into how you've steered Old Mutual Corporate through this once-in-a-generation pandemic. And we wish you well. And I'm sure the entire Big Green organization is looking forward to setting itself up for another 175 years. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure.